Beneath the opulence of crowns and the elegance captured in portraits, a troubling secret lay hidden. For centuries, the royal lineage of Britain bore not just privilege and scandal, but also a sinister whisper, rumors of an ailment that society shunned from open discussion. In hushed tones, tales circulated of clandestine remedies, obscured physicians, mysterious blue pills, and the toxic embrace of mercury. This narrative transcends mere medical accounts. It unveils a royal autopsy. For behind each throne, there lies a story of decay, some royals even rotting from within. Welcome to the unsettling saga of 20 British royals afflicted by syphilis, a chronicle of rulers entrapped by a malady that refused to submit. Before we journey into this tale, if you find the shadows of history compelling and laced with irony, consider subscribing. Your support breathes life into this channel, unlike the fragile fate of many royals within our tale. Also, share your location with us. What time is it for you? Is it midnight in Manchester or 3 a.m. in Toronto? Let's discover who else is up at this hour. In the annals of history, the legend of Edward IV, born in 1442 and departing in 1483, looms large. It is nearly impossible to envision the illustrious founder of the House of York as anything but a premier victor. He stood tall at over 6 feet, with a robust build and flowing golden locks, a figure crafted for battle. Edward IV was the quintessential warrior of the medieval era, a man seemingly blessed by fate and the gods of war. Yet, beneath the glimmer of his royal attire and the fierceness of his persona, there lurked a shadow, a condition that gnawed at his very essence. As he entered his 40s, the sheen that once marked his reign began to fade. Chronicles speak of a rapid and disturbing decline, detailing his battles against boils, fevers, and debilitating fatigue, with one chronicler delicately referring to his affliction as a visitation of pustules. This king, once fearless enough to charge into combat without a helmet, found himself unable to ascend the stairs. In a time when medical understanding leaned more on poetic interpretation than factual diagnosis, a shadowy ailment lingered at the periphery of his world, the Great Pox, better known as syphilis. Though historical records remain silent on the matter, Edward's symptoms resemble a notorious Renaissance checklist. The spread of this disease among Europe's elite began in earnest by the 1490s, during Edward's reign, suggesting an alarming intersection of fate. Some historians speculate that the burdens of warfare led to his untimely death, while others note with intrigue the rapid deterioration he experienced once separated from the battlefield's adrenaline. His decline was only the beginning. His heirs, Edward V and the infamous lost princes of the Tower, would soon be swallowed by history's dark embrace. If Edward epitomized the glamorous facade of a decaying monarchy, the king who followed him, a figure of cold calculation, inherited not just the crown but the weight of a legacy shrouded in turmoil. Henry VII, who ruled from 1457 to 1509, was not a man preoccupied with romance. Rarely seen with a smile, he trusted few and counted his coins with the vigilance of a ruler fearing rebellion. In his official portraits, the tension etched on his face suggests a man perpetually anticipating upheaval. Indeed, his reign was suffused with anxiety, a stolen throne, a suspicious marriage, and a nation still reeling from the bloody aftermath of the Wars of the Roses. So, when whispers emerged late in his life about the possibility of his contracting the French disease, it felt like yet another fissure in the stern facade he maintained. The evidence remained circumstantial, like the murmurings surrounding deceased monarchs. Nonetheless, it's captivating. There were reports of sickness at court, intermittent fevers, painful joints, and strange skin afflictions. Orders were issued to keep the physician's treatments discreet, while the term the pox floated ominously, only to be hastily suppressed. What makes this tale remarkable is not its salacious nature but its unsettling ordinariness. Even a king renowned for his caution, austerity, and religious piety could fall victim to a disease linked to indulgence. This highlights a stark truth. Nobody was truly above the fears of their time, not even the king who calculated each decision so meticulously. Yet, while Henry VII concealed his demons, his son, Henry VIII, would emerge to flaunt his own in a dazzling display, perhaps even spreading his plight. With 2 kings explored and 18 remaining, the descent into these feverish royal narratives is just beginning. If this eerie exploration of monarchy has piqued your interest, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on our next deep and unsettling discovery. And while you're here, drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Are you cozy in bed during a night shift or simply enjoying a peculiar history lesson over breakfast? Let's connect and make this odd little enclave of the internet feel a touch less isolated. Henry VIII, who ruled from 1491 to 1547, is often portrayed as a force of destruction, his reign marked by 6 tumultuous marriages, countless executions, and radical shifts in religion that would leave even reformers like Martin Luther astonished. But his story goes beyond a mere break with the Catholic Church. It's as if he shattered the very essence of an entire era. Amidst the chaos of his rule, a persistent yet unsettling rumor encircled him, suggesting that this mighty king was haunted by syphilis. The intrigue lies in his afflictions: chronic migraines, unhealed leg injuries from a notorious jousting incident, significant weight gain, erratic moods, and decaying teeth, all leading to tragic failures in securing a healthy male heir. His notorious rage and irrational acts only add weight to this medical enigma. However, modern historians regard this theory with skepticism. There's a lack of solid proof regarding treatments for syphilis, and alternative explanations like diabetes or the toll of a reckless lifestyle are gaining traction. Still, the syphilis myth endures, perhaps because it aligns perfectly with the tale of a king desperately trying to rewrite destiny while possibly suffering silent decay within. And perhaps his ill-fated son, who met a mysterious end in childhood, bore the true weight of Henry's legacy. Our tale begins with Henry Fitzroy, the Duke of Richmond, a figure whose brief existence spanned from 1519 to 1536. Born into the world as the illegitimate son of Henry VIII and his youthful lover Elizabeth Blount, Fitzroy arrived under the shadow of scandal yet illuminated with ambition. Gifted with grand titles and splendid estates, he seemed a favoured child, groomed swiftly for a potential royal path, one his father appeared to consider in the era's complex play of legitimacy. At the tender age of 6, he was bestowed the title of Duke, but by just 17, death claimed him. The official narrative attributed his demise to tuberculosis, a common explanation for the untimely departures of the young and noble. Yet, whispers from the past suggest a more sinister undertone, hinting at the wasting disease and the affliction haunting his father. Some modern interpretations speculate his fate may have been tied to congenital syphilis, given the swirling rumors about Henry VII's health. However, this theory has its flaws. Congenital syphilis typically leaves visible scars, physical evidence of its toll. Fitzroy's education was exemplary, and his visage was recorded as noble and unmarred. Nevertheless, the abrupt decline described as an alarming drain of life sparked a narrative that persists, hinting at Fitzroy as a mere pawn in a fragile lineage. Or perhaps he inherited darker legacies, entwined with his father's tumultuous existence. If Fitzroy serves as the prologue of royal tragedies, the story unfolds further with the next queen, who transforms suffering into a grand performance, carrying the weight of lost souls within her very being. 5. Mary, the Eye of England, remembered through the years from 1516 to 1558. With a Bible firmly grasped in one hand and a funeral bell hanging ominously in the other, She etched her name as England's first official queen, a monarch shadowed by haunting spectres. Her era is infamous for the burning of Protestants, yet a more enigmatic legacy simmers beneath the surface. Mary endured 2 phantom pregnancies, left without a living heir, her existence laden with an inexplicable agony that defied doctors' understanding and historian scrutiny. Enter the theory of syphilis, a somewhat unsettling notion that creeps into discussions. Some 19th century historians, desperate for clarity, posited that she may have inherited congenital syphilis from her father or contracted some obscure ailment linked to her Tudor lineage. The proof remains elusive, as her menstrual cycles were erratic, and she battled severe headaches and sleepless nights. Her skin, often described in correspondence as sallow and delicate, told a story of suffering, intensified by those notorious false pregnancies, complete with royal proclamations and an apparent swelling. While today scholars largely attribute Mary's health crises to psychosomatic stress, hormonal imbalances, or possibly uterine cancer, the notion that she was fated to struggle long before claiming her crown endures. The idea of the crown not solely passing through blood, but also unyielding illness, persists. For Mary was not merely a tragic figure, she stood as a paradox, devout yet cursed, adorned yet childless. If she was England's most tormented queen, her successor would reign through his own tumultuous, ulcer-ridden haze. James VI of Scotland, who would later be known as James I of England, wielded a unique power as he unified crowns. Yet, despite this monumental achievement, he never truly captured the hearts of his subjects. A king marked by contradictions, he possessed a remarkable intellect, yet harbored a surprising gullibility. His fervent faith clashed with a strange obsession for witchcraft. He was a ruler of might, constantly tormented by what he referred to as his infirmities. These very afflictions led to whispers among historians. Could James have been suffering from syphilis? The signs were apparent. He exhibited tremors, twitching, and skin lesions described by his contemporaries as foul and moist. His affinity for overpowering perfumes only added to the intrigue. Of particular note was the repeated prescription of mercury by his physicians, the common treatment of the time for the dreaded pox, despite its toxic nature. Accounts suggest he indulged in baths of mercury, consumed it, and endured uncomfortable layers after each dose. His reputation for poor personal hygiene and self-imposed isolation, blaming it on noxious vapors and melancholy, bred gossip at court that artfully avoided direct accusations but implied scandal. Officially recorded as dying from a stroke, his gradual decline, erratic demeanor, and reliance on mercury hint at a darker, more discreet truth. Though James ushered in a transformative political age for the English court, his successor would bask in a return to an older era, one filled with decadence, debauchery, and perhaps a hint of royal decay. 7. Charles II, born in 1630 and passing in 1685. The moniker Merry Monarch was not bestowed upon Charles II due to his decorum. Upon his triumphant return to the English throne, he reintroduced an era of libertine excess. After years spent in exile, he revived the arts, fashion, and a court life that resembled a grand masquerade. Charles attracted a multitude of mistresses, fathered numerous illegitimate children, and embraced a lifestyle brimming with vice, leaving no space for subtlety. Thus, when whispers emerged of his contracting syphilis during his youth, likely while in France, it hardly raised an eyebrow. His personal doctors administered guarcam, a traditional remedy for the pox, alongside mercury-laden concoctions under the guise of treating nervous disorders. In his later years, he battled chronic skin afflictions, exhaustion, and a swift decline in health. An autopsy later disclosed discolored lungs, enlarged organs, and unexpected bodily decay, framed in vague royal discretion. Yet, The allure of Charles lies not merely in the possibility of syphilis but in his unyielding spirit. He continued to revel in life's pleasures, even in the face of affliction, passing away amidst flickering candles, courtiers, and disparate medical treatments. Among his last utterances was a poignant, "Let not poor Nelly starve," a nod to his beloved mistress, Nell Gwynn, embodying a king's devotion till the end, perhaps troubled by his own ailments. Following him came George, a prince whose preference for indulgent meals overshadowed his governance, carrying with him more than mere political baggage as the 19th century dawned. In the annals of history, few figures embody excess like George IV, who reigned from 1762 to 1830. As he ascended to the throne, his reputation was already marred by overwhelming debt, titillating scandals, and an extravagant wardrobe that seemed to require its own financial system. Yet, underneath the sumptuous waistcoats and powdered wigs, a far more serious affliction brewed, one that extended beyond the realm of tabloid whispers. His medical history is laden with euphemistic language. Cycles of blue pills, laced with mercury, aimed to combat a persistent syphilis, while other treatments like guaiacum were tried in a desperate bid for relief. Publicly, he managed gout and dropsy, but behind closed doors, doctors confronted something far more complex. Letters hinted at troubling swellings, eruptions, and an unspoken ailment that grew more insidious with time. George himself wryly commented on feeling consumed from within, though whether he spoke in jest or with grim sincerity remains a question. Ultimately, the toll of his indulgences took a precise toll on his body. By his twilight, he struggled to walk, burdened with fluid retention and plagued by hallucinations. His last years were a gradual deterioration, veiled in the shadows of royal decorum. Yet, amid all his struggles, George had someone to hold accountable: his younger brother, a figure whose inadequacies and indiscretions brought a different kind of scandal to light, one that his public had little inkling of. 9. Prince Frederick, Duke of York, lived from 1763 to 1827. This military-focused second son is perhaps more infamous for his defeats in battle than for winning affection. As the Commander-in-Chief of the British Army, he enacted significant reforms in recruitment, tackled corruption, and inadvertently became the character behind the nursery rhyme, the Grand Old Duke of York. Yet, beneath the surface, Frederick was possibly engaged in a more intimate struggle, unrelated to battlefield tactics and far more personal: his fight with venereal disease. The gossip originated from his well-known mistress, Mary Ann Clark. Following their tumultuous relationship, she exposed his private ailments to Parliament's press, claiming he suffered from chronic issues requiring mercury treatments and blue pills. Initially dismissed as the spiteful whims of a jilted lover, her accusations cast a shadow that lingered in the public imagination. Rumors swirled about a disease of Venus, a euphemism for syphilis, especially as Frederick began to retreat from public life, disappearing for prolonged periods for treatment. Strangely, he never contradicted these whispers. Silence is often the shield royals choose when facing maladies more symbolic than clinical. His later years descended into growing seclusion and deteriorating health, marked by a departure from the vibrancy of court activities. However, not all royal afflictions could be concealed in the confines of the palace. Some, like those that befell the following princes, led to public funerals and an enigmatic diagnosis that continues to spark debate even today. 10. Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence, 1864 to 1892. Born into the rigid structure of Victorian royalty, Prince Albert Victor was destined for kingship, molded by the weight of expectations and the silence that surrounded him. Yet, before he could stumble into his future, fate took a tragic turn. At just 28, he suddenly disappeared from the public eye, courtesy of what the newspapers framed as an unexpected illness. His untimely death left behind not just a vacant throne, but a profound mystery shrouded in questions. Could it truly have been influenza and pneumonia that claimed him, or did something darker lurk beneath? Whispers began to circulate almost immediately. Some speculated typhoid, while others pointed to tuberculosis. Yet, one persistent theory shadowed him throughout history, that of tertiary syphilis, the most advanced and devastating form of the disease. This could explain his erratic behavior and unexplained absences for health reasons, as well as the vague language found in the official reports of his passing. Historians have highlighted the enigmatic nature of his medical records and the euphemistic style of royal announcements. To this day, no conclusive diagnosis has surfaced. What is particularly chilling is the false association of Albert Victor with the infamous Jack the Ripper, a connection that insinuated not only a struggle with illness but suggested depravity. Despite the theory being thoroughly dismissed, it lingered, mirroring the haunting tales of the Victorian era that held a certain allure amid decay. Just as Albert Victor's health issues were shrouded in mystery, the next royal lady subjected to scrutiny faced public judgment, as her foes savagely smeared her reputation. In the year 1533, Elizabeth Bohr entered a world that would soon fixate on her very essence. As Elizabeth I arrived at her middle age, her appearance turned into a national emblem, a striking representation of power intertwined with intrigue. Her skin, meticulously painted a ghostly white and adorned with layers of lead-laden cosmetics, served a dual purpose, both a display and a shield. Scars, whether they were visible or hidden beneath the surface, forged the foundation for swirling rumors of syphilis that danced politically in the corridors of power, far more than medically. In a time when an authoritative unmarried woman was often seen as scandalous, detractors whispered malicious accusations that connected her ailing health, her hair loss, her frail frame, and her excessively powdered face to a supposed affliction. It was a playbook of tarnishing her reputation. Modern historians conjecture that smallpox accounted for some of those physical scars, while the toxic lead in her makeup likely contributed to her deteriorating condition. Yet, the incessant chatter persisted. Protestants labeled her a virgin, whereas Catholics branded her as impure. Her steadfastness against matrimony transformed her into the focal point of both religious propaganda and sordid rumors. Beneath the surface, Elizabeth's genuine struggle may have been one of profound isolation. Surrounded by suitors, she deftly avoided bonds veiled as romantic proposals. In an epoch where women either ascended to legendary heights or were cast as monstrous figures, Elizabeth adept embodied both extremes. While her reign hinged on the power of her image and intellect, her successor would find his own physical plight betraying him in far more humiliating fashions. King Charles, a figure who reigned from 1600 to 1649, transcended the role of monarch. He was an embodiment of contradiction, moving with a languid grace in his velvet garments. Believing firmly in the divine right to rule, he became consumed by ritualistic formalities and deeply introverted tendencies. His reign unfolded like a tragic opera, leading ultimately to a grim finale, his execution in front of an eager crowd. While royalists sanctified him, Parliament condemned him, but prior to this fateful moment, whispers of deeper turmoil seemed to envelop him, according to the gossip of the 17th century. Portraits from his later years depicted a man ravaged by the toll of his reign, his skin marked with blotches, hair brittle, and cheek sunken. Courtly rumors, rife with intrigue, suggested bouts of fever and arcane remedies prescribed by royal physicians. Yet, the credibility of these claims remains uncertain. Many stemmed from his adversaries and those who circulated propaganda designed to tarnish his reputation. Syphilis was a particularly favored accusation hurled at fallen rulers, insinuating a connection between moral decay and physical affliction. However, What the records do reveal are appointments with physicians who had expertise in treating venereal diseases, purchases of mercury-laden remedies, and extended absences from the court for unspecified ailments. These could signify nothing significant or point to the gradual disintegration of a monarch doomed to a public downfall. Nevertheless, Charles faced his end with remarkable composure. In stark contrast, his son would endure a life marred by whispers of the Catholic pox prince, where suspicions extended beyond mere political rivalry. James II, who reigned from 1633 to 1701, lacked the finesse that his older brother, Charles II, effortlessly displayed. While Charles captivated all with his charm and flair, James stood rigid and pious, marked instead by a string of misfortunes. His conversion to Catholicism ignited a full constitutional crisis, while his rule ultimately collapsed during the tumult of the Glorious Revolution. Even prior to this upheaval, murmurs circulated regarding his early life, romantic entanglements, and a troubling illness that clung to him like an unwanted legacy. Pamphlets from that era insinuated that James may have suffered from the pox during his reckless youth. Though these claims were politically charged, sharply aimed at a Catholic king, they had a kernel of truth. James did engage in affairs, and his years as a soldier, particularly in France and Spain, exposed him to the rampant syphilis among troops. His health remained a fragile affair, beset by fevers, rashes, and unpredictable bouts of weakness. The medical records, scant as they are, reveal treatments consistent with venereal diseases, including the harsh use of purgatives and mercury. To the surprise of many, he lived longer than anticipated, yet an air of decay, both physical and political, followed him relentlessly. Even in exile, the tales of his past haunted him. While whispers of his questionable health persisted, it was his grandson who would transform suspicion into documentation, leaving behind detailed bills for medical practitioners whose remedies were neither cheap nor clean. George II, who reigned from 1683 to 1760, is often remembered as the last British monarch to lead his troops on the battlefield. Yet, he may also possess a more discreet legacy, one that remains hidden away from public recognition. Among his household documents, beyond the routine records of royal wine supplies, there exists a troubling list of purchases from doctors specializing in the treatment of venereal diseases. Mentions of mercury and notes regarding blue pills and mysterious elixirs for purification weave a shadowy narrative. Officially, he was never declared ill, with only the mundane ailment of indigestion acknowledged publicly. However, the guarded entries of 18th century record-keeping hint at more significant troubles. One record referred cryptically to issues like eruptions of heat and swelling in the limbs, a phrase so ambiguous it stirs suspicion. While George II was not notorious for infidelity, lengthy absences from his queen led to whispers of potential indiscretions. In a palace rife with secrets, concrete evidence remained elusive. Could it be that he was merely covering the costs for another's treatment? Or did he, like many royals before him, wrestle silently with an illness that had no respect for his title? While George II may shrink into the margins of medical intrigue, his nephew would ensure his own tale emerged, filled with scandal, passionate affairs, and a lingering illness that remained unspoken. Prince Henry, Duke of Cumberland, lived between 1745 and 1790, a figure often shrouded in scandal. To those serving at the palace, he was the topic of hushed conversations, his life dominated by gambling, controversial unions, and scandalous behavior. His notorious marriage to Anne Horton, a commoner and his former lover, ignited a firestorm of indignation and ultimately contributed to the establishment of the Royal Marriages Act of 1772. Yet, it wasn't solely his romantic escapades that raised eyebrows. His later years were marked by a troubling illness, described in the court diaries with a deliberate ambiguity that suggested something covert. As he grew more secluded, he endured various treatments that included purgatives and enigmatic remedies. Political commentators cast a shadow over him, using loaded terms like tainted and fallen to describe his plight. The public, already wary of the prince's personal choices, began speculating. Though there were no formal claims against him, whispers hinted at syphilis as the source of his deterioration, a fitting conclusion to a life of excess, culminating in an uncertain and drawn-out demise. His marriage, seen by many as questionable in morality, now faced scrutiny over its physical implications. While Prince Henry's transgressions remained quiet gossip, the next royal couple found their troubles splashed across the tabloids, accused of inflicting more than emotional wounds in their disintegrating union. Queen Caroline of Brunswick, born in 1768, truly stepped into the chaotic realm of royal life with a fervour that was as thrilling as it was tumultuous. Her marriage to George IV, a union riddled with discord from the very beginning, was marked by animosity. George not only disliked her, his disdain was palpable even before their vows were exchanged. In a dramatic twist of fate, Caroline matched his animosity with equal fervour. Their separation occurred quickly, yet the repercussions of their discord would echo for years, evolving into one of the most hostile and publicly scrutinised royal rifts in the annals of British history. As they lived apart, the press thrived on scandalous portrayals. Caroline faced ridicule, with the media cruelly mocking everything from her appearance to her voice. Perhaps most malicious were the insinuations that both she and George were afflicted by syphilis, a devastating accusation during the Victorian era. One biting cartoon illustrated them as grotesque figures, each accusing the other of their frailties, with a malicious caption that barely evaded banning. Though no medical records substantiate her supposed illness, the mere allegations significantly impacted how the public perceived her. Ironically, as the drama unfolded, public empathy began to tilt in her favour. While George cowered behind closed doors and relied on the advice of his physicians, Caroline boldly strode into the House of Lords during her scandalous trial, demanding justice with an intensity that drew the public's eye. Whether her health issues were true or simply part of this political narrative, they undoubtedly added to her legend. Her life came to a bittersweet end just weeks after she was barred from attending George's coronation, leaving whispers in the air regarding her royal lineage and casting a sombre shadow of speculation in her wake. Edward VII, who reigned from 1841 to 1910, inhabited the imposing shadow cast by his mother, Queen Victoria. In a bid to carve his own identity, he surrounded himself with an intoxicating blend of charm, opulence, and fragrant perfumes. Before his ascension to the throne, he was notorious across Europe as a playboy prince, a figure whose affairs were so elaborate that his mistresses had their own admirers. Such a lifestyle inevitably birthed rumours of syphilis, clinging to him like his tailored silk waistcoats. Discreet whispers from valets and memoirists alike hinted at his dependence on protective ointments and remedies kept discreetly out of sight. His personal attendant was said to concoct special salves for particular social engagements, raising eyebrows but leaving confirmation elusive. If he did indeed suffer from the disease, he either successfully managed or miraculously overcame it, living on until the age of 70, long enough to outlive the scandals and govern with an unexpected degree of skill. Yet, posthumous speculative biographies hinted at shady pasts and their potential repercussions. Behind the polished veneer of the Edwardian court lay a cadre of physicians whose records told a different narrative, one steeped in muted treatments and euphemistic prescriptions. While Edward VI's ailments were never definitively confirmed, the next heir bore a dossier substantial enough to interest not just medical professionals, but also MI5. Prince George, Duke of Kent, lived from 1902 to 1942, but his life was anything but ordinary, more akin to the pages of a sensational tabloid. With his striking good looks and undeniable charm, he appeared captivated not by the responsibilities of royalty, but by the allure of the opulent nightlife of the 1930s. His days were filled with fast cars, rapid friendships, and swift getaways, all cloaked in an air of elegance and excitement. Yet, this glittering facade was not without its shadows. Whispers of addiction, fleeting affairs, and a dark cloud of syphilis loomed ominously over him. Navigating through the era of mass media, Prince George's story could not escape the prying eyes of the press, which, while respectful of the crown, found it impossible to suppress the swirling rumors. Both domestic and foreign gossip columns alluded to his mysterious medical treatments and long absences, often masked as travel or simple fatigue. Declassified documents from intelligence services revealed subtle hints about health issues and private struggles that required ongoing attention. The line between truth and sensationalism became increasingly blurred. Some claimed he fell ill during his reckless escapades in the bustling 1920s, frequenting high society circles rife with scandal, while others speculated that these stories were part of a political maneuver to undermine his influence and tarnish his unconventional image. Tragically, his life was cut short when he perished in a plane crash during World War II, branded as an unfortunate accident by official accounts. Yet, beneath the surface, his existence feels like an unfinished royal chronicle, filled with unanswered questions. As he departed this world, another royal figure soon faced scrutiny even while still in mourning, with his own challenges forcing the public to wrestle with far more controversial misconceptions surrounding him. Prince Albert, who lived from 1819 to 1861, stood in stark contrast to Queen Victoria. His precision, deliberation, and unwavering dedication to modernizing the monarchy set him apart. He was the architect behind the introduction of plumbing to royal residences, a fervent advocate for reform, and exercised a kind of meticulous oversight over the moral fabric of the 19th century court. Yet, in a twist that would haunt history, Victorian society whispered a sensational and unfounded story, that he did not succumb to typhoid fever as documented, but rather to syphilis. The stage was set when Albert fell ill. His condition deteriorated alarmingly fast. Feverish and languid, he faded within weeks. The official word cited typhoid fever as the cause, yet some symptoms, mental cloudiness, muscular frailty, and extreme fatigue, didn't fully align with this diagnosis. This discrepancy ignited speculation. Some suggested Albert had once suffered from a venereal disease, a notion that could have taken root during his youth in Germany, or perhaps more scandalously, during his later years in England. This theory lacked evidence. No documents or medical notes substantiated the claims. Yet it flourished in the public narrative, tantalizing in its contradiction. Here was a figure of impeccable virtues brought low by a malady often linked to moral decay. Albert, overworked and young at his passing, embodied the moral compass of an empire unable to safeguard him. Fast forward to the future, and we meet his great-grandson, a royal poised on the edge of their own throne, shadowed by a legacy that entangled them in a web of unrelenting speculation. Edward VII, Duke of Windsor, lived from 1894 until 1972. His reign, though fleeting at a mere 11 months, has ignited conversations that span a lifetime. He famously abdicated his throne out of love, transforming into the quintessential romantic story of the 20th century. Yet, hidden beneath the grandeur of speeches and the allure of scandal, lie whispers nestled in the shadowy corners of British intelligence. As the decades rolled on, murmurs suggested Edward left more than just a crown in his wake. Some hinted at a venereal infection. This theory rests upon his younger years as the Prince of Wales, notorious for his fleeting romances and nightlife revelries. Here was a man who seemingly disregarded the gravity of his royal responsibilities. Newly declassified MI5 files reveal cryptic references to a range of medical inquiries from that time, overseas health retreats, discreet consultations with physicians, and hints of an illness with questionable origins. The speculation oscillates between syphilis and the simpler spectre of anxiety, yet a definitive diagnosis was never publicized. Edward maintained his dapper, athletic facade while expertly sidestepping political duties. However, his reputation gradually transformed from a national icon to a diplomatic burden. His connections with dubious warrior figures didn't help matters either. Ultimately, the most significant ailment of Edward VII might have been his disconnection from duty, from his country, and perhaps from reality itself. This introspection leads us to a compelling conclusion after recounting 20 royals, each layered with half-truths, as their legacy remains clouded by this peculiar affliction. Some may have left behind mere whispers, others suspicious accounts, but collectively, they reveal a narrative Britain never wished to confront. For all the finery and tradition, royalty has never been shielded from the insidious decay that lurks behind its public facade.